the Cooper Spirits. We are excited to go over some of the stuff that they've got already out on market and some of the stuff that'll be coming up soon, some stuff I'm really excited about. And then we'll be taking a look at Slow and Low, which I'm sure many of you have seen on the shelf. I had not tried it, still haven't, so we'll be trying it. I wanted to wait and crack it open and try it now while we're on camera. But really excited to talk about the Cooper Spirits and you, Chad, and a little bit about the stories for both the distillery and yourself. So with that, we're going to go ahead and play the intro reel, and we'll get it going.
Cool.
Excellent, guys. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Let's go ahead and start out. Chad, tell us a little bit about you and how you got involved with the Cooper Spirits.
Well, thanks for having me, Greg, first off. My name is Chad Solomon, and I am the Director of Trade Advocacy and Innovation for the Cooper Spirits Company. Cooper Spirits is now headquartered in Newport Beach, California, but was founded in 2006 by third-generation distiller Robert Cooper. As for me, I got involved and started bartending in New York City right after 9/11, and I had worked in the film business there up until 9/11, and with filming suspended, decided to jump behind a bar and was really there at the right place, the right time, and ended up joining Milk and Honey, one of the preeminent pioneering craft cocktail lounges, or little bars really, in April of '02. And from there, I went on and joined the Flatiron Lounge, Julie Reiner. Granted, I always worked at Milk and Honey, but I had to have several other gigs as Milk and Honey was very small. I also ended up on the inaugural team, bartending team at Pegu Club, which was owned and run by Audrey Saunders. And that's actually where I met Rob Cooper in 2006. So as I mentioned before, Rob founded the Cooper Spirits Company in 2006, and he created Saint Germain, which launched in April of 2007. Rob became friends with several of us in the craft cocktail community there in New York, and obviously Saint Germain really just took off like a rocket. We were very excited to have an elderflower liqueur at the time because there were a couple of things that we could get from overseas, but none of them were shelf stable in the way that Saint Germain was. And it was even back then, which is not that far back, elderflower was kind of still a very foreign flavor to most American palates, even in New York. So Rob brought that to market, but he saw our excitement simultaneously for rye whiskey and how rye really set off like a wildfire. At Pegu Club was and Milk and Honey and Flatiron Lounge. We were some of the early advocates for the very few ryes that were on the market at the time in championing rye cocktails. And really quickly, you saw that as the bars that I was involved with, we would sell those, products and cocktails, using rye whiskey. Well, you saw more and more bars and restaurants bringing that into their programs. And overnight, there's this really intense, renewed interest. And at that point, had been almost a dusty, kind of very sleepy category. And Bob was really, really at the forefront. And he saw our passion and enthusiasm. He got it. He liked it. And around that time, by 2007, you had PDT and Death & Co. open, and those are two, very, very important and pioneering bars, kind of spreading the gospel of craft cocktails, if you will. And a shorthand term kind of developed at the time. You'd go in, and obviously the bartender's choice phenomenon starts to really take hold, where you go in and you put your, guests put their, put the selection in the hands of the bartender to recommend drinks. Well, a shorthand style for an old-fashioned drink or a stirred aromatic drink was, a guest would come in and say, I want something stirred down and brown. And that could be anything from an old-fashioned to a fancy to a Boulevardier, Manhattan on the rocks, a Vieux Carré. It was shorthand for that kind of, style of drink. My story with Cooper Spirits, in addition getting friends with Rob. Rob had approached me about coming up with a name for a new concept and a new innovation that he had, coming on the heels of the success of Saint Germain. So we sat down in 2008, is when he first started thinking about this, and he's like, I want to take a craft cocktail lounge level rye old fashioned, and I want to put it in a bottle, but I want to do it through the lens of historic rock and rye. Or the other way of saying it was, he's like, I want to revive the historic category of rock and rye. We can get into that on an elemental level, but I want to do it through the lens of a bottled rye whiskey old fashioned. And he said, I'd like you to take a crack at naming it. And so I came up with several names. We sat down, met, and ultimately that's where the name Slow and Low came from. And it was another euphemism for that kind of stirred down and brown shorthand, also drawing on, at the time, the excitement of the slow food movement that was gaining steam in New York. And we were friends with the president of Slow Foods USA, was another person in our social mix back then. As well as, I born and raised in Texas, in low and slow barbecue culture, just that idea of taking the time to do something right. How is it that we can revive, Rob's idea was rock and rye had become this very, kind of an easily dismissed liqueur category that was made with very, very inferior ingredients, overly saccharine and sweet. And he said, how could we, revive it, but make it with integrity, to re-lens it through, the lens of a rye whiskey old fashioned, and that would be Slow and Low. And so my initial conversations grew from being involved with him in the naming into worked on it, the formulation with him, and then, a lot of the early brand essence and brand aura. And funnily enough, obviously Saint Germain took off like a rocket. So all those conversations started in 2008. The actual release of Slow and Low did not happen until 2012. And one of the other cool things that, came along in that process was based on one of the other names they had for, that I had for Slow and Low, which was Canned Heat. He was like, you know what, let's put an old fashioned in a can. And so on that very first meeting when we were going through names, he was like, let's figure it out. And that was in 2008. Well, the can finally came out, the 100 ml can. It took 4 years of innovation to figure out how to take a high proof cocktail and put it in a can. It would not as easy as one would think. So Rob started working on that in earnest in 2012, and they finally released it. It was August of 2016. But really, really kind of it's very interesting living in this year right now, how forward thinking, Rob was. This is really 12 years ago with the inception of the idea.
Hey, Chad. My name's Will.
Will, you're excellent about.
Oh, I see.
How's it going, Will?
See if I can get rid of your echo.
Anyway.
Is that any better?
We still got an echo. So, anyways, hold on. Let's go.
Yeah, I just hit you with a lot of stuff. So wait. So let's talk about it. So literally, that's what the idea was. I mean, what's the juice in the bottle, right? So Rob took the historic category of rock and rye that dates back to the mid 1800s. Rock and rye literally starts from the saloon ideal of rye whiskey being served with a kind of a side bowl of rock candy, where it being served to the guests, and the guests could sweeten their whiskey. And this was done kind of in a medicinal way, thought to sore throats, coughs, kind of a little bit of a cure-all across the bar top. And it's also, if we look back in whiskey history, saloons would have been receiving product at barrel proof and rectifying down to their choice, or possibly cutting it with whatever else they wanted. So it's your mileage may have varied in terms of what you would have received. By the 1884, this interesting tax, the way rock and rye was taxed as a medicine up until 1883, there's a change in tax law on medicine and spirits, where the taxation on medicine was raised because you had so many patent medicines of dubious kind of formulation, very alcohol driven and narcotic driven. And that the smart fella realized he could, have fun with the patent medicine. So they raised the excise tax on the patent medicine. And in 1884, all of a sudden it was Rock and Rye. The smart guys said, nope, we're now a liqueur or flavored whiskey. And they moved from Rock and Rye being a medicine into it being beverage alcohol spirit. But they skirted the line, and you see it very much promoted through the end of the 19th century as a cure-all, once again, medicinal. And this would have been rye that was sweetened. Rock candy is really just candy that has been, the sugar crystals are formed by simmering down a sugar syrup solution and letting the crystals form and grow much more robust. But it's just another, form of sucrose or common table sugar. I was
going to say, I got to say, so I've seen this bottle a few times at the store. I just haven't had the opportunity to try it, but it's a really distinct bottle. It just screams like old fashioned bottle style. And the really cool thing about it is I've seen it all the time, and I didn't know what it was. I hadn't tried it. But I'm not a huge fan of stuff that's overly sweet. And when you get a lot of these pre-mixed cocktails, you get stuff that is just, you have to add whiskey to it. Otherwise it's too much for me. But the interesting thing is, when I was reading it and I saw, straight rye whiskey, raw honey, navel orange, rock candy, I was a little worried that it would be way too sweet for me. I kind of had that reaction. But it's insanely smooth. It's 84 proof, so obviously it's I usually drink stuff around 110. I know Will was the first of us to dive bravely into the over 100 proof when we were first starting out tasting. But it's really good. It's got a lot of depth to it. It's got rye spice notes, but it's balanced by the sweetness. So you get a lot of earth to it. You get a lot of rye spice to it. But I get that honey. I get a little bit of almost like a molassesy rock sugar under it. It's not just straight table white sugar that you would get somewhere else. It's almost got a molasses flavor to it. The bitters are nice in there. This is something you could toss over ice or drink straight and just sip on it. And it's funny because it doesn't scream, hey, we're a pre-bottled cocktail. But it actually does a really good job of being just that, almost more so than some of the pre-bottled cocktails that are marketed, pre-bottled cocktail. So it's interesting to see. This is almost like one of those sleeping gems I just have yet to have tried.
Well, thank you very much. There's a lot of very positive attributes in there. Let's talk about what's actually in it. You mentioned the various things. So it's built on a base of 2 to 2.5 year straight rye whiskey. There is a proprietary blend of a couple of rye whiskeys, all very, very high rye mash bills. We did not want, as much as I like the Kentucky ryes, we wanted to honor more of the older New England, Pennsylvania, Maryland, very high rye mash bill, rye flavor profile, and sought ryes that have very high rye mash bills. So that rye is aged in char number 4 alligator char barrels. It is sweetened. So one of the other things that we did on the formulation was we wanted this to be sweetened the exact equivalent of 1 sugar cube to 2 ounces of whiskey. And that works out to 4 grams of sugar per 2 ounces, like the same way as you'd get a standard old fashioned in a bar. So sugar cube, 1 sugar cube, 2 ounces of whiskey, 4 grams of sugar. So there's a split between the honey, which is a raw honey. It's a raw orange blossom honey that we source, and the rock candy syrup, but those combined are the equivalent of that 1 sugar cube. So this is like right out of the bottle. The idea was, can you just pour this over a sugar cube, give it a couple of stirs to slightly chill it, but dilute it, and end up with a craft bar level old fashioned without having to go and muddle the sugar cube, make the sugar syrup, get the citrus peel, add the bitters. Everything is here, and that was the way the lens that we work to do it. So if you try it, you're going to smell, you're going to get the honey, you get those kind of caramel and baking spice notes on the nose, and then you go in for a taste, and you really get a bit more of the whiskey and the bitters, and it does dry down. It's definitely not cloying.
I will.
I'm afraid to speak.
I mean, if I was you, I'd be afraid to speak too.
Yeah, I think we've lost Chad.
Maybe we did. He'll be back. So what are you sipping on?
Poured some Weller Full Proof tonight.
Nice. Well, that's on our top 10 whiskeys list, so that's good.
Yeah.
So while Chad comes back, Will, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on these pre-bottled cocktails. We're starting to see a lot of them pop through. We're starting to see a lot of stuff. I think we've seen a few times. We've seen Manhattans made with various Buffalo Trace stuff. We've seen old fashions made with collaborations with higher end whiskey people. This is actually really good, and it doesn't really scream the marketing. I mean, if you look at it, would that scream to you pre-bottled cocktail?
No, it wouldn't. And honestly, I don't know if this is a good thing or not. I mean, how is it a good thing to have old fashioned so convenient? I mean, it's.
If you ask my liver,
that's what I'm saying. I mean, I like that it takes a little bit of time to make an old fashioned because it doesn't take very much time to drink one. So I'm afraid if I had them in a can, I mean, it's I don't know how much of a good thing that is. No, but it's amazing that they've been able to make one that tastes, very good. So as good as it does.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that's true. And some people like you and I like to take the time to create our own unique spin on old fashions. But I've got a bunch of friends in the area who they just want to be able to pour and sip, man. They're not. Yeah. They don't have the bar set up. They don't have anything. They're whiskey fans. They hunt good whiskey, but they just don't. They aren't cocktail people, or they just don't have the equipment or the time or the practice to do it, and they just want something they can pour easy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like you said, it's so much fun to be able to. I mean, just the experience of making one. It's an enjoyable experience. But at times you just want to sit down and you want to pour something and sip on it. And you don't have time, so it's nice to have that option, that convenience.
Yeah, I mean, this one's pretty good. So I was just telling him earlier. I mean, and you heard too. So the rye is really, really good. I mean, the rye whiskey, for being as young as it is, it blends really nicely. That spice carries the whiskey through a lot of the sweetness that's in here, and then the the orange and the rock candy and the honey and all that. So you have a younger, spicier rye because you can taste it. I mean, it drinks, I would say, right around 90 proof, but that's probably because the young rye is picking it up and carrying it through that pour. But I mean, it's pretty good. And then one of the things, if we get Chad back on, he was talking about is that Cooper's is actually coming out with a 20-year age statement rye.
Wow.
That's supposed to drop, I think he said, late this year, early next year. But man, a 20-year age statement rye. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we see a lot of 18 years blow through, but not a ton of nothing really more.
Well, most of the stuff, I mean, you're either drinking, it seems like 2 to 3 year whiskey, or you're drinking 10-year whiskey, right? Or I guess a lot of people seem to settle in. A lot of the distilleries seem to settle around. Most of their offering is somewhere around 6 or 7 years. So 20 years has got to be something special.
Excellent.
Hey, guys.
We were talking about how much we liked the balance of the whiskey, and we were also talking about how dangerous it is to have pre-done cocktails this well readily available.
We'd like to think it's a necessary convenience. I was going to say, just to show you guys, I don't know if you have a glass of ice there. I mean, the idea was really how simple can we make this, reviving this, and bottling, a rye old fashioned with integrity, but that was as simple as just pouring it over ice and, just letting it open up. Really, really, you get much more of the whiskey presence, the bitters, and that orange all at once. And that was, the ultimate usage idea here. And, the thing that's been really, really interesting over time is seeing, this was ahead of its time. And, all of the other ideas that we see bartenders doing, with it. Obviously, it's a bottled rye old fashioned. It is also technically a rock and rye. So it's got more utility, although this was just designed to be, a bottle of Slow and Low for at home, and the can for on the go.
Well, there you go. I mean, drink responsibly, but I like the on-the-go idea. So you have some other bottles that you wanted to talk to us about too, right? That you guys have coming up.
So, the interesting thing is, as Rob got into this, he started buying barrels and, with an enthusiasm, and really cultivated quite an incredible library of rye whiskey. And even during the process, when I worked with him on formulation for Slow and Low, he was struck with, he's like, God, he's like, some of the, the juice is just so good. What about putting this out on its own? And ultimately, what he came up with, the idea was putting out a rye that really, really delivered, that was meant for bartenders and for cocktails, but that really punched above its weight. And so he took the Scottish term of vatting, or the vatted term, which is kind of the forerunner to blending, and is released Hochstetter's Vatted Rye. And so Hochstetter's Vatted Rye is the first American whiskey to use the vatted terminology. And really what that means is this is a blend of four different straight rye whiskeys. And this is our third release that's coming out. It's just now shipping. So this is a blend of straight ryes aged 4 to 18 years old. These ryes are sourced from Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Alberta. 2 of those are MGP and Alberta distillers. The other 2 are proprietary. But the heart of this vatted blend is 8 years old. So this is an 8-year-old with some 18-year-old juice in it, as well as some 4-year-old. But the heart of this blend is 8 years old. It is absolutely, phenomenal. This is just now, like I said, shipping as our third allocated release. You guys are in Tampa, so I can definitely sync you up with Michael, our rep there. And we got to circle back on this one. This is just absolutely killer juice, 100 proof. And once again, the other idea with this is that this really honored the more older colonial style of rye. Very, very high rye mash bill, big rye presence. And what's interesting about the vatting process is it allows you, very much the same way you see in Scotland, you see sourcing of different single malts, you blend them together, you let them marry to harmonize to really create a sum greater than its parts. And this is that same idea here with multiple different source straight rye whiskeys.
Chad, it's very interesting. You talk about the blend. I mean, there's lots of blended whiskey today, and and it's very good. It's amazing when you start pairing some of these, you start blending some of these different aged barrels together, what you can come up with. Tell us a little bit about that process. I'm sure there was lots of different. It's almost like a science project. You're trying this, you're trying that. It's an experiment.
It is, and then there's the other thing, which is really the sensory side of this. Drinking and our perception of flavor and taste is very much it is perception. So this is really down to the powers of sense, especially in the world of blending. The real kind of art to it is developing your nose to then, because aroma has so much impact on our perception on the palate. So you're looking for those aromatic sensory signatures on the nose as well as the palate, and that's really, as you're looking at each of your different whiskeys, probably the best analogy would be looking at colors on a palette. So you're assigning value, as well as that's the way that's going to impact the palate. Whether it's specific notes. Let's just say something like, is it citrusy or baking spice? Or is it green and herbaceous? Or is it more, the kind of woodsy, dry, almost charred elements? You take those, on an aromatic signature, and you start to put this together, and you say, well, what do I want to highlight? And it's kind of a process of elimination and really just, coming back down. I think, in particular, there was this thing for we wanted the rye grain to shine. We wanted enough barrel, but we didn't want to bury it, in something that was overly oaked, overly charred. And I think there's a really, really nice balance. Some of the whiskey in here is actually aged in a 3.5 char barrel with no toast. So that really, really allows the more cereal qualities to come in. There's a little bit less of, that kind of barrel element, whereas some of the other barrels in here are at that much heavier char number 4 alligator char. And so those different things in the right combination really, allow that. And I think one of the things that in particular is that it's that slight kind of spearmint green dill note on the finish, almost German rye bread, as it came to this one, the Vatted. But we wanted that same very, very, high rye cereal, component. It's almost a piquant quality, to anchor the slow and low.
Nice. And you have, I think you have one more to share with us, right?
Right. And so this one is coming out here, hoping to have it out here, but end of year. Should be shipping just as COVID has kind of slowed things down. This is actually, I don't have the actual bottle because that's how we're still literally waiting to bottle. So this is a lock, stock, and barrel 18-year. So some of the very first barrels that Rob bought was he was stepping into this world were from Alberta Distillers in 2008. And so the Lock, Stock, and Barrel series started with, we've done a 13-year, this is the initial release, a 16-year, an 18-year, and we're now going to be coming out with a 20-year. So these are all 100% rye mash bill. These are, the idea was that these would go and be able to age for a long run. This is going to be the 20-year, having tasted through all of them, no hyperbole. The 20-year, these are all just insanely delicious. The 20-year is supremely excellent. Every one of these have been bottled overproof, and the 20-year is coming out at 56% ABV or 112 proof. So stay tuned for that. That's hitting here really right here at the end of the year.
Well, we're pretty darn excited to try that. I know, Will, there's not a ton of 20-year stuff that we've tried. We've had, I don't know what, 10 or so bottles aged at 20 years.
There's not a ton of 20-year things out there. So
I think a lot of the ones that I've tried are orphan barrel stuff. And then, obviously Pappy 20, and we've tried that. And then, but I mean, the 20-year, Michter's 20-year was unbelievable. And it's just the things that I've had hit 20 years. I'm a big fan of that, that wood sugar, vanilla-y, wood spice type feel. But I've never had a rye aged like that. Everything that I've had's been in bourbon. So to try something 20-year rye, I mean, It's hard for me to wrap my head around a 20-year rye.
I'm going to tell you, this whole range has been so incredibly unique. Well, we've got to get something on the books, and I'll have to come back.
Yeah, for sure.
It is. It's exceptional. It's really kind of quite singular.
So I assume that's going to be like a highly allocated release.
It is. I think we're 700 3-pack cases.
Really?
So SRP at $398.
Wow. Well, I mean, for a 20-year rye, like you just don't see those on market.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're over there. Your wheels are turning.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get my hands on one of those.
I mean, that's gonna be crazy, man. It's a 20-year rye. That blows my mind. But so with it being in 2-year intervals, I mean, does it seem like it's been almost like a compounding change in the whiskey every 2 years? Does it seem like just a larger and larger leap of difference, or does it seem like it gets more and more mild a difference with each taste?
No, and I think part of great question. And no, you don't necessarily see it mellowing. It's really interesting. As these have been proofed down, you're really seeing where it shows best. So these are not universally proofed. It is the best for each expression, right? And so there's actually a 3-year difference in the first two. We went from 13 to 16, then 18, then 20, and then there's a 2-year. And what's interesting is really what you're seeing, different elements of the rye and the whiskey itself being expressed. And it's not necessarily, it's not a straight line. And it actually makes it more interesting when you're able to do them side by side. They're all balanced, if you taste them in isolation, and then it's really quite interesting to see them, side by side. And the other thing is as much as you feel overall kind of the barrel presence, I suppose, creeping in, we're pretty far from having it dominate. Got it.
Well, that's excellent, man. How much will a bottle of Slow and Low set somebody back?
So our SRP, suggested retail price for Slow and Low, is $24.95.
Really?
The Vatted will be coming out at $59.95, and this is for that 4 to 18-year blend, kind of 8-year heart. And this is the Lock Stock 20. I realize I'm pointing to a 13-year-old bottle, but imagine this is Lock Stock 20-year. This will be $398.
So really, it's less than $25 for somebody to go ahead and give Slow and Low a try.
Correct. And the cans, come in right at about $5. And it's really hard because the retail world is so different.
Depending on
this is a 100 milliliter can. It's basically a double old fashioned, two old fashions in a can, 250 ml, and same proof. It's the exact same juice as the bottle, just two different kind of usage occasions.
Excellent. So definitely, guys. At $25, if you're a fan of old fashions, definitely worth a shot. If you are somebody who's a fan of old fashions and doesn't mix them at home or doesn't keep a supply of cocktail stuff, this could be a really good alternative for you, especially if you're not a huge fan of stuff being overly sweet, but you do like the flavors that come with that sweetness, the flavors that come with the honey, that flavors that come with that molassesy sugar. Could be a really good opportunity for you. Also, it's got the world's biggest freaking cork, which is kind of awesome. It does. It's ridiculous. It's a big one, but it's excellent, and it's great straight. I've tried it straight. I'm sure it is phenomenal over ice, where it'll open up some of those more subtle flavors and pick apart some of the depth of that sweetness. Probably release a little bit of floral flavors in there too from those orange blossoms, right?
Orange blossom, and the other thing I didn't mention is we do use air-dried navel orange peel, and that essential oil from that orange peel, infused in the whiskey, the same way that you could, express one over the top, if you're making an old-fashioned a la Manute. So yes,
you definitely get that, the orange peel in there. It's almost like a candied orange oil, if you will. And I think that's it interacting with that rock sugar and that molasses kind of bridging the earthy sweetness with that fruity sweetness and kind of making a parallel there, which is nice. But guys, definitely $25 if you see it, definitely worth picking up, especially if you have friends over and you entertain a lot. If you entertain a lot and you don't feel like breaking out the cocktail kit, because I know Will, you and I, if I have 1 or 2 people over, I'll make some cocktails for us. But if I have a couple people over, especially once we're out of this pandemic, and this is a great thing to just toss over some ice if you're looking to make some quick cocktails. Because I know once I reach like 4 old fashions, I'm done. I don't, I just want to sit and sip something. So this would be a really good way for entry level whiskey people to come into whiskey, try something nice while they find their own recipes. Great for entertaining. Definitely recommend. Well, Chad, thank you so much. Will, thank you for being here, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday for Whiskey Wednesday.
Thank you, Greg and Will. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.